Welcome to No Apologies. I'm Dana Lash. Think back to when you were a kid and a person in authority told you some rule or policy and it didn't make sense. So what would you do? You'd ask questions about those rules and you were kind of feeling around for the substance behind the rule. It's a normal thing. We all do it, and we all do it from an early age. We want to know why we have to do X, Y, and Z. Now, 99% of the time, most adults would take the time to answer you thoughtfully, carefully. Even though adults are naturally in a position of authority over kids, they understand that a rule given without any kind of substantiation is a rule that lacks gravitas or authority. And why is that? Because the best rules or policies have solid explanations. So in other words, they're based in truth and fact, and it's easy to substantiate them. It's easy to prove them. These laws, these kinds of laws or rules or policies, they have really, they make sense to people. Like, for example, don't drink and drive. Everybody knows this rule, right? You don't drink and drive because you're not at your best when you're 7 beers in, super dangerous to yourself, super dangerous to other people. It's bad all around. It makes sense, right? The data supports the fact that drinking and driving is hazardous to health. You don't have to be convinced of the need of laws that necessitate, we all vote on them, we all talk about it. That's that quasi-social contract that we have. It's necessary. Society doesn't resist it because it makes common sense and you want people to be safe on the roads. Lately, though, it seems like our institutions just make them up as they go. They don't really seem to care if you understand the why behind these policies and rules. This is particularly true of coronavirus policy. So one of the reasons that the American people are getting increasingly hard to manage is because no one's answering their questions. Now, I've tried to ask a ton of questions in incredibly good faith, and I really do want answers to my questions, but they still go unanswered, right? Nobody answers any of this stuff. For instance, like as it relates to the coronavirus, millions of questions, and they bring on the same people and they ask them the same questions time and time again. There is nothing new asked. Now, the double mask, 6 feet of mask, triple vaxxer types, they don't really help either because when you talk to them, it's clear they don't know what they're talking about either. These obedient types, they don't ask questions. They just live in this sycophantic awe of the CDC and Dr. Fauci. Literally, people are using the phrase Fauci ouchie. I just feel like I just need to stare at that longer because that's that ridiculous. The point is that people just saying, just do what you're told, don't ask questions, trust. When people say trust the science, they usually mean like trust the government, which I don't. It's clearly just faith in institutions that so many of us find entirely untrustworthy. Even the so-called experts, PhDs and doctors seem genuinely confused. And even when they're trotted out on legacy media, they are interviewed. The people who are interviewing them, there's no actual genuine interrogation. There's no question of truth. They're more like PSAs, right? From the CDC, the NIH, or some other TV doctor. But there are some really good questions about this virus and the policies that are being instituted increasingly by shaming and force. I want to do my part, but I need answers to my questions. Here's some genuine questions that I feel are never satisfactorily answered about vaccines and any kind of mitigation policies as it relates to the pandemic. For instance, are people with lung tissue inflammation issues, are they more likely or less likely to deal with reported instances of myo or pericarditis, as noted in one age demo post-vax, right? That's a genuine question. What about genome sequencing? Is that required to detect and analyze variants from the original? So in other words, how do I know what variant I have if I get the virus, and are we testing for that? And by the way, like one other question, if we're testing to identify the particular variant that I might have, how are additional boosters of the vaccine that were designed for the original strain, how are they able to target the mutated virus? Are we doing genome sequencing for those? Is it possible that RSV cases, and there's a huge spike in RSV cases across the country, are they being mistaken for the Delta variant in the same way the flu might have been confused with coronavirus case counts? Because remember, when the flu completely apparently disappeared last year, presumably absorbed into the COVID case count. Or how about, why are we acting as if a person who is unvaccinated is a threat to a vaccinated person who, after all, they've taken the whole safe and effective vaccine? Why is it when fewer than 400 people under the age of 18 have died from coronavirus since the beginning of the pandemic, almost all with secondary conditions, according to Johns Hopkins, why are we beginning to hear demands for kids to be vaccinated? Or what about reports of different altercations, different effects in women's menstruation cycles post-vaccine. I mean, where are some of these questions? For instance, what about animal reservoirs? Because we also know about the interspecies. I mean, you're warned to not cuddle your cat, your dog, whatever. So how many booster shots are we signing up to get throughout life now? Because we could just get a different mutation due to animals, right? I mean, that's something that's been discussed. So where's the answer to that question? We're made of questions. Or what about the VAERS system? And I know that people are saying that VAERS, they don't vet every single case that's posted. Okay, and the CDC does? Because that's why the Wall Street Journal and Johns Hopkins literally had to go through and vet every single case that the CDC had cited. And speaking of the CDC, do we even want to get into the whole situation with Florida and how they combined multiple days into one case number for one day and lied about it? And everybody wrote horrible articles and headlines about Ron DeSantis murdering Floridians. No, the VAERS system, it would indicate that there's some adverse reactions to some of the vaccines. Now, of course, you're going to have all of this at some point, but why can't we even talk about it? It's like you can't even discuss any kind of adverse reactions. And why, by the way, are we talking about if it's mandatory, then why does the government not hold any liability if they're forcing you to do it? Now, as we were talking about, what percentage of people have had adverse reactions? I mean, who has them? Men, women, kids? Why do they think that they're having such a reaction? Are we tracking this data? Are they genetically predispositioned to have this kind of a reaction? Why are we to believe that the virus only mutates when it encounters an unvaccinated person's immune system? I mean, mutation is the result of selective pressure. It's a mass universal vaccine. Seems like one massive selective pressure on the virus. I'm not the only one saying this, by the way. I mean, there are other scientists saying this, including those who were involved in the mRNA, the process of that and bringing it to mass market like this. But will anybody answer these questions? Why is there so little curiosity about all of this? There was no curiosity about the very obvious lab escape hypothesis for over a year from the CDC or the WHO or the Biden administration. And now we know that there looks like there was a great possibility of lab escape. Why didn't journalists ask this obvious question? Why do we keep misrepresenting who is not vaccinated, always blaming the working class white crowd? When in fact, when you actually look at the per capita percentage, which is how you actually have to thoroughly and accurately vet this stuff, CNN doesn't understand this. When you have the Black community and the Hispanic community, they all have the highest percentage of unvaccinated individuals. And nobody's going to talk about why Black Americans are completely justified in being suspicious of government mandate testing. I mean, do we really want to go back and talk about Tuskegee and everything else? Why do we not talk about obesity and its relationship to this virus and the severe symptoms of it? Some estimates are that more than 70% of people that have died from COVID were obese. But instead of talking about it, our culture pushes this imagery that celebrates not just, there's one thing in being overweight and there's one thing with having curves, but morbid obesity is something entirely different. Why is there so much censorship around these issues? Why are people afraid to talk about it? Why don't doctors go on record when they have concerns for fear of losing their jobs? These questions, everyone, are legitimate. I mean, I even have more. There's great answers, I'm sure, that are out there. So why doesn't the CDC provide them? Hold a press conference, be transparent, right? I mean, I've looked on the CDC website for a lot of this information, and for my questions, I haven't been able to find really anything. I found some stuff on Johns Hopkins' website, but that's about it. Instead, this is the kind of stuff that we're told. Watch this.
It's very dangerous, Chuck, because a lot of what you're seeing as attacks on me, quite frankly, are attacks on science.
I have to have a deep breath. That's the answer of a person in authority who has no answer. He's not science, and we can actually criticize and ask questions when due. The answer increasingly is because, well, we said so. That might work for parents with kids and how they deal with their kids. That doesn't work in a republic in which the government is the servant of the people that fund it and give it authority by consent. But even worse than the whole I'm science incarnate, so stop asking those questions, that approach like Dr. Fauci and the CDC's Rochelle Walensky, which, by the way, wow, some of the sound bites from her, it's this tactic of shaming that's being deployed from the whole double-masked, triple-vaxxed crowd. And the shaming isn't just coming from your neurotic neighbor, it's coming from the administration, who's been blaming the entire pandemic on unvaccinated people while they have the CDC going out there and saying that the vaccinated can also spread this too. No substantiation at all for this claim, just shaming in order to get you to do what they tell you. Watch.
The pandemic we have now is a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
This is becoming a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
This was always a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
So while this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated, there are millions of children who can get sick because adults won't do something to protect them.
It is the pandemic of the unvaccinated.
This is now a pandemic of the unvaccinated. It is now a pandemic of choice. The choice not to get vaccinated.
It is a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
What is happening in America right now is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. Let me say that again. It's a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
Don't you love how they all got the same talking points and they all try to say it in their best stage actor way of, well, I just thought of this, the unvaxxed. Shut up. We know that you guys all had the same talking points. Stop pretending. You were horrible actors. And we just had the CDC's Rochelle Walensky go out and say just this week that even if you did get the vaccine, it's just at this point, it's really reducing the severity of symptoms. It's not preventing transmissions. But I thought it was so it's the vaccinated too, huh? There was a great article, by the way, on all of the shaming and blaming by my friend Glenn Reynolds in the New York Post today. The article is titled, "Mask Bullies Don't Want to Persuade You. They Want to Humiliate and Rule You." Now, my friend Glenn Reynolds says this, quote, "Generally, calling people names, threatening them, saying that they're stupid, those are ineffective ways of winning them over. Yet we're seeing more and more of this sort of thing. Maybe the mask fanatics are just poor persuaders, but it seems just as likely that they're engaging in poor persuasion because they aren't trying to persuade," end quote. So that's the point that I was making at the top of the segment. When rules and policies, when they have substantiation, when you can actually provide evidence for why you have the rules that you have, when you can make the case, when you can explain people because you are giving them data, that makes it to where people they can understand it a little bit more. They are more inclined to believe you. They feel that you're being transparent and forthright with us, and you don't have to shame them into complying because you're sharing with them information. You're letting them know that you know what you know what you don't. And for a lot of this, it's brand new, so let's all work at it together. Why couldn't people have just taken that pathway? Why is the CDC and the administration having such a hard time convincing people to get vaccinated? Well, because things don't add up. Questions aren't being answered. Shaming and blaming, this is the tactic of choice. Maybe it's because they don't have good answers, but that's what people do when they have an agenda, right? So they get angry and they turn it around on you by shaming and gaslighting you. I mean, think about this. I can't tell you how many times I've shared the video of Rochelle Walensky on Wolf Blitzer's program on CNN saying that the vaccine simply reduces the severity of symptoms and it's actually not stopping any of that anymore. And yet people are acting like it's still, that whole soundbite, that video montage that we just played, that's all you still hear. That's all you still hear. No answers from anyone. You're just getting gaslit. Okay, so then why wouldn't you call it a therapeutic? Everyone is gaslighting. Watch this exchange, by the way. This is Dr. Fauci and Senator Rand Paul. And this is, I think, one of my favorites in this whole soap opera of who to believe in the pandemic scandal. Watch.
Senator Paul, I have never lied before the Congress, and I do not retract that statement. This paper that you are referring to was judged by qualified staff up and down the chain as not being gain of function.
So
let me finish.
You take an animal virus and you increase its transmissibility to humans,
right.
You're saying that's not gain of function?
Yeah, that is correct. And Senator Paul, you do not know what you are talking about, quite frankly. And I want to say that officially. You do not know what you are talking about.
Why is he bouncing in his seat? That's so weird. You're not on a damn roller coaster. You're not science incarnate, okay? And Senator Rand Paul is a very successful and very well-respected eye surgeon. He's a doctor. Gain of function is like medicine 101, science 101 stuff. Everyone knows what it means. And when you take a virus and you alter it to where it can now go between species, guess what? You have just given an additional function. It is literally the definition of gain of function. Now, you notice in the exchanges between Paul and Fauci never answers the question. He goes after Rand Paul personally. How is this guy a professional? Why in the ever-loving hell are we believing this person? It's a shaming tactic. We see it all over the country. I am fed up and so done with it. I'm done. And we're seeing it happening not just up, but through the Biden administration. And they're going out there. The president should set the tone, a better one. And instead, he's going out there shaming along with the legacy press. Now, back to Glenn Reynolds, his piece in the New York Post. Here he gives his explanation for the shame game tactics that we see used against anyone who has a legitimate question. He says, quote, at any rate, all of this, the blaming and shaming on social media and everywhere, is less about persuasion than about the emotional needs of people doing the blaming and shaming. It makes them feel better about themselves. And in today's society, feeling better about oneself is the greatest of achievements, end quote. Yeah, and the shaming and blaming, it goes beyond ridicule too. Now some people are even floating ideas beyond vax passes, which will segregate and create this like quasi-apartheid system with first and second class citizens. So what are these new and punitive ideas for being unvaccinated? Well, one idea that some people are having is to add a special tax to the unvaccinated. That's right, tax the unvaxxed. They want you to pay for not being vaccinated because they argue you're a special burden on the system. From the article in Washington Monthly, and I quote, policymakers and employers have radically shifted their treatment of vaccine holdouts in recent days. Carrots like $1 million prizes, college scholarships are giving way to sticks and cudgels with vaccine mandates. For government workers, and proof of vaccination is soon to be required for activities like indoor dining. They said that this is going to be increasingly inconvenient life for the unvaccinated, and it should also become increasingly expensive. And then the article goes on to advocate for a whole bunch of special taxes and levies and fees for the unvaccinated, flying, for sports, for your kids in school even, hospital fees, surcharges, etc. They want to make you pay for your private health choice. And now why are you going to have to pay more tax? Because show us the data that the unvaccinated are costing the system. And by the way, I mean, what about, if you want to talk about having a burden on the system, let's talk about the people out there who don't pay their fair share of taxes. I paid 6 figures in taxes last year, so I'm not going to be lectured by someone whose highest level of knowledge about medicine is just working in the journalism field, because we know what a successful gaslighting operation that is. And I'm not going to take lectures or any kind of condemnation for someone who isn't a medical professional, particularly someone who thinks that it's better to go out and shame people who are unvaccinated than ask the government agencies that we have paid for. All 21,000 employees of the CDC, we have paid for. How is it that we don't have any more information than we already have right now? We're still in the dark. We're at square one. We're still in the same place that we were with knowledge about this a year ago. We all pay taxes. Where's the return on my investment? Before some person gets all high and mighty up on their white horse on the East Coast, up on their high horse on the East Coast, maybe they need to stop and ask, as members of the press, where's the return on the investment of the tax dollars already paid? Right? Where is that return? Because right now I'm being burdened with pain for a too large government that's not giving me enough information about things that they believe that they have the right to mandate I be injected with. So that's the burden that I'm dealing with. I'm also dealing with fake know-it-alls who write things in Washington Monthly about how people who already pay too much tax, they pay their fair share and everyone else's fair share, about how apparently their desire to know a little bit more about what they're injecting themselves with is somehow a burden on them. The stupidity and arrogance of certain reporters, as the one I just cited here, is the burden on society. Now, how about the unvaccinated pay disproportionately higher taxes to begin with, right? It's possible. Show us the data, right? Show us that these people are not paying their fair share. This is just bullying, shaming, dividing, all of it. And by the way, since Black and Latino Americans, these are the populations with the highest percentages of unvaccinated people, and they have very legitimate reasons. So do I get to do what the left does? You're discriminating now against minority citizens. Imagine the optics on that. I can't wait to watch how Bill de Blasio is going to explain turning all these Black patrons away from restaurants in New York City, or adding special taxes to people's dinner bills for being unvaxxed. So we just need to have like a pop-up Joe Biden scream Jim Crow or Jim Eagle now, because that's exactly what this is. Think it through. I know it's really hard for the double masker, triple vaxxers, 6 feet of masks to like process this. Pull down the mask, oxygenate the brain, Think about what I just said. You think you're discriminating against the whole MAGA crowd, right? Trump voters, but you're actually discriminating against the people that you fake care about. And that's because you don't care about them. You just use them. And that's why they always are the ones that get the shortest end of the stick with your policies. And by the way, more minorities are figuring this out by every day. So thank you for revealing how the Democrat Party's always been on the wrong side of history. This is going to look really great for all those midterm ads in 2022 and particularly in 2024, because with idiotic and very divisive and quite frankly racist policies like these, you're creating the greatest coalition of people since the revolution. And they all have one thing in common. They despise tyranny. They will not tolerate it. It's not too late. There's a way to manage this pandemic and maybe try to claw back some of the trust of the American people. First off, you can start answering our questions. We pay you. So pay me. I want what I paid for. I want answers. Show some humility. The American people would understand and sympathize maybe if you did, although I might be past that. It's a pandemic. It's caused by a virus that's maybe, I don't know, seems like it might be engineered in a lab by a foreign enemy hell-bent on world dominance. It's like nothing that we've ever faced before, ever. Of course, there's going to be missteps and confusion and sometimes contradictions because it's unprecedented. So just admit what you don't know. Admit what you got wrong. Arm people with information. Let them exercise their free will, because after all, blaming and shaming, those are the tactics of thugs and communist regimes. It's not the behavior or tactics of anyone in this republic with our democratic process that we call America. So coming up, the Senate passed 2 bills yesterday, and now we're being told to brace for more massive spending. Yay! What's that going to look like? We break it down with economist Stephen Moore after this. Yesterday was a very busy day for the Senate. They're all spending our money, or at least talking about ways that they're going to spend our money. Some major spending bills. Now America needs to get ready for more massive spending. Senate Democrats estimate that their tax and spend, their whole infrastructure budget plan, this is going to yield, $45 trillion of debt by 2031. Stephen Moore is the chair of the Economic Revival Task Force for Freedom Works. He joins me now to break this all down. Stephen, good to see you. Thanks for joining me. I'm not looking forward to any of this, and it worries me a little bit because I feel as though that maybe not a lot of Republican voters are as fired up about this as they need to be. I always get mad when we talk about taxes and money. What are your thoughts on this? Because I just feel like we're talking about raising the debt ceiling and no offset spending, and then tax cuts or tax increases rather coming down the road as well. This is a bad bill, and we've got Republicans helping out with it. Why?
So let me just start by saying, Dana, that I think this was one of the worst days in the history of the United States Senate. On August 10, 2011. It will go down in infamy. What happened on that day when the Senate voted and 19 Republicans joined every Democrat to pass a big oinker, $1 trillion bill that's advertised as an infrastructure bill, but in fact it's a big green energy bill that advances this radical environmental agenda. And then a few hours later, at the wee hours of the morning, the Democrats then passed a budget resolution authorizing another $3.5 trillion of debt finance and spending. This is the Great Society War on Poverty Part 2, because the first war on poverty was such a great success, right? They're going to spend hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars on welfare programs. By the way, not tied to work, not tied to giving people a hand up, but tied to giving people free health care, free child care, free kindergarten, free community college, free food, free everything's going to be free. And, I think that we will get fired up as a movement. Conservatives around the country we need another Tea Party. We cannot allow this to happen. It will bankrupt our country. It will cause a financial crisis. It will cause runaway inflation. And we will be leaving to our children debts that will be unconscionably high.
Oh, completely. And I like your sentiment. We do, because this is, I feel like we took to the streets for less than this back in 2008, 9, and 10, for way less than this. This is too big to fail on a lot of steroids. I mean, ultimately, that's what this is. And I was looking at some of the stuff that was in this as well. I mean, you're right. When you get into the Green New Deal, I mean, it's basically you're talking about income redistribution through like Solyndra Part 5. I don't know how many other Solyndras that we've had. I mean, there's a lot of bad stuff in here. But one of the things that you touched on, Stephen, that I think a lot of people maybe don't recognized historically, is that nations have been brought down by this kind of runaway spending and the super out of control inflation. I mean, the Roman Empire, I mean, Spain and the 15th century. I mean, all of this, their empires have been completely cratered because of this. And we could be looking at something like that.
Well, hopefully we're going to correct this before the Titanic hits the iceberg, right? I mean, because we're headed right to a financial iceberg that would really kill our country. And what we're really talking about when we talk, these trillions of dollars are hard for people to fathom, but this is more money that was authorized in the wee hours of the morning on Tuesday. This is more money than the United States government borrowed in today's dollars to finance the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, World War I, World War II, the building of the entire interstate highway system, and winning the Cold War. I mean, so these numbers are gigantic. Every child born today, if we pass this bill, will inherit somewhere between $600,000 and $1 million of debt from the moment they are born. I mean, what great country does that to their children? A great country pays its bills. We were built on the notion of being a free enterprise country. That is the goose that lays the golden eggs. It's why America has become the most prosperous country in the world. But you know this. I mean, the left was very honest. They told us they wanted to transform America. And that's exactly what they're trying to do here.
Exactly. With all of the, I see that the National Endowment of the Arts, they get some money. They get, going into the green energy, which I thought was very interesting. I understand that when we talk about.
Let me just interrupt you for a second.
Oh,
How about this? $40 billion for the IRS. $40
billion. To weaponize the IRS.
They want to double the size of the IRS. They want to hire 75,000 new IRS auditors. I mean, it's like you and I are going to have an IRS auditor in our living room. I mean, it's going to be unbelievable. And you and I know who they're going to target for these audits, right? They're not going to target liberal Democrats. They're coming after us. They're coming after conservative donors. They're coming after people with conservative views. They will weaponize the IRS just like they did under Obama. Remember where they went after conservative organizations? We cannot allow this to happen. I mean, this is not a fire drill, folks. These people are deadly serious. They have an agenda that will move America radically to the left. And incidentally, the big winner here, if they get this bill through, will be China. We will be surrendering our economic leadership to China.
What is it? How much? It's over $1 trillion of our debt that they currently own, and we would, because in addition to just going into debt further and further indebting ourselves to China, we're also going to be funding them because of all of the green energy that they want to throw us into with the purchase of electric vehicles. Of course, we have the whole rare earth elements that China has the monopoly on. I think we're still several years away from even having one operational rare earth elements mine in the United States. I think Canada's trying to get one up, but that pales in comparison to what's going on with China. They have no environmental regulations, no worker protections. They can do whatever they want to. And as you know, Stephen, the pollution doesn't cross the Pacific Ocean. It magically stays just in China. No one realizes that. And I really wish that Republicans would get so good on that messaging and say, if we care so much about the environment, why are we ruining it over there with China while also indebting ourselves to what I think is our greatest enemy?
So every time we shut down a coal plant here in the United States, China builds 10 coal plants. So somebody explained to me how that's going to reduce global warming. How about this one? I mean, I still am mystified by this. I'm scratching my head trying to figure out the logic of this. So the first thing Joe Biden did when he came into office was kill the Keystone Pipeline, which, by the way, doesn't cost a penny. The private sector was going to build the Keystone Pipeline. It was going to bring that oil and gas from North Dakota all the way down to Houston, and then we could export it around the world. So Biden kills that. And then 3 weeks ago, he greenlights a pipeline from Siberia, Russia to Germany. I mean, come on. That's hardly putting America first.
Yeah, destabilizing NATO on top of it. And of course, then because that oil still has to get transported to Houston. So I guess railways are just the safer way to do it. Using more fossil fuels to transport fossil fuels. And then I'm sure, Stephen, you saw the headline today, too. Joe Biden's begging OPEC to help out Joe Biden after now energy prices are on the rise. And he's looking at 2022 and inflation. And so now he's begging OPEC to come in and amp up the amount of barrels a day that they're producing. I mean, maybe they should have maybe they're rethinking the whole Keystone Pipeline thing. Do you think?
So, yeah, look, the big winners from this Biden green energy agenda, and it infiltrates everything that they do. These people are completely obsessed with climate change. That's everything they do is about climate change. And when you look at the agenda, who are the big winners here? The Saudis, OPEC, Vladimir Putin, Russia. They can't believe their good luck. I mean, we're unilaterally disarming ourselves. Under Donald Trump, I was very proud to serve for Donald Trump. We became energy independent for the first time in 50 years. Now we're going to be dependent on the Saudis. We're going to be dependent on OPEC. We're going to be, we're going to have to get our natural gas from Russia. Does this make any sense? No. And by the way, natural gas is one of the cleanest fuels out there. I just do not understand the logic of this. We have to stop it. It is not a fire drill here, folks. These people are serious. They want to transform America. They want to move us towards socialism. If they succeed, it will take us years and years and decades to undo the damage that this $3.5 trillion bill would do.
Which we might not do. I have two quick questions for you. First off, do you think that Republicans are agreeing, like those 19 Republicans that you mentioned that had signed on to this, are they trying to protect the I've been looking at every different strategy, trying to be as generous as possible, which is not in my nature. And I'm looking at this, trying to think, are they trying to protect the filibuster? Are they worried about another big spending plan coming down? What do you think? Is this Mitch McConnell just is he doing some kind of parliamentary strategy that we just don't understand?
Maybe, because I don't understand it. And by the way, I respect Mitch McConnell. I think he's been a fabulous leader for the Republicans in the Senate. I don't get his strategy here. I mean, from the very start, Nancy Pelosi said, if we don't get that bipartisan $1.5 trillion, infrastructure bill, then there's not going to be any $3.5 trillion. And if I'm Republican, I'm like, okay, great, we can live with that. Instead, the Republicans said, okay, we'll pass this $1 trillion bill. And then what the Democrats are doing is taking everything the Republicans are against, and they're putting it in this other bill. So we're going to get the worst of all worlds here. And by the way, these Republicans who voted for that bill are aiding and abetting the Pelosi, Schumer, Biden agenda. They're aiding and abetting it. And one other quick thing, because you can tell I'm angry about this.
I like it when you get angry about this.
What did Republicans get? When you negotiate a compromise, what did they get? They didn't get the Keystone Pipeline. They didn't get fossil fuel development. They didn't get anything. There's no pay-fors. It's a phony as a $3 bill. They didn't cut a single dollar of spending. I mean, the Democrats are dancing a little jig in the White House right now.
Yeah, completely. The headlines, Biden gets it. Oh, Biden delivered. That's what I keep seeing. Last question for you, talking to Stephen Moore, and appreciate your time today and always enjoy your perspective on this. I know Nancy Pelosi is going to try to do some gamesmanship here in the White House and say we're not going to consider this until we get, because she's been fighting with reconciliation, et cetera. Is this going to die in the House, do you think? Is there a good chance on that? I'm just trying to figure out where to focus my firepower here, rhetorically.
From your lips it's a sad day in America when we have to depend on Nancy Pelosi to defeat this thing. But this shows how greedy they are. They actually don't think they got enough in this bill. So maybe the AOC and the squad and Nancy Pelosi will say this isn't good enough, and Republicans will come back to their senses. But I do sense there's a revolt going on in America. I think people, and not just Republicans, independents, Democrats, they realize this is an extraordinarily dangerous thing. Even people who voted for Biden, they didn't vote for this. They didn't vote for $5 trillion of debt.
Yeah, that's a debt that I can't imagine that we would ever be able to get out from beneath, definitely. Stephen Moore, always appreciate your time. Thanks so much for your perspective. And I enjoyed your piece about this, too. You had a great piece about the debt ceiling, so I appreciated that. Good to see you. All right, folks, coming up, we have Congressman Andy Biggs. He is fighting the good fight with CRT funding in schools. He joins me next to discuss that. Also, he's looking at going after DHS head Mayorkas. We're going to have that and more. Stay with us. Black Rifle Coffee Company is a veteran-owned coffee company that serves premium coffee to people who love America. Veteran CEO and founder Evan Hafer spent over 7 years on the ground overseas with U.S. Special Forces and as a CIA contractor. Black Rifle Coffee is committed to Evan's mission of supporting veteran, law enforcement, and first responder causes. So this summer, Black Rifle Coffee Company invites you to enjoy your coffee, whether you're brewing the perfect cup of pour-over or cracking open a can of 300 on your next backcountry mission. Black Rifle Coffee is here to fuel your way wherever summer takes you. So head on over to blackriflecoffee.com/DanaTV to order yours and use code DanaTV at checkout for 20% off your first purchase and your first coffee club order. Fuel your summer with Mayorkas coffee. Black Rifle Coffee. Congressman Andy Biggs of Arizona has been on the forefront of this fight against critical race theory, and now the House Freedom Caucus has vowed to oppose any spending bill that doesn't defund it. And he's also been very, very vocal about what's been happening at the border, and we'll talk about that as well. Congressman Biggs joins us. Congressman, good to see you, as always.
Thanks. Good to be with you, as always.
Of course. We're getting ready to start the school year. I have one that goes back to school tomorrow. I have a week before another one goes back. Everybody, CRT, we watched. I have a friend who lives in that Franklin area in Tennessee, and they just had that big old fight about CRT and everything else. Talk to us a little bit about this and what the House Freedom Caucus is doing, because this is insane. And the reaction that school boards have been having to parents who simply want to have involvement in what their tax dollars and their kids are doing is, I've just been stunned with how I thought we lived in a republic.
Yeah, this has been an amazing season. I mean, think eight months ago, Dana, hardly anybody had ever even heard of critical race theory. But one thing that COVID did, it allowed parents to see what was going on in their school, their child's school, the things they were studying, and critical race theory was exposed. It is a pernicious Marxian-based theory. So we see this all over the United States today, and in Arizona, for instance, the legislature banned it. And that's where we're trying to get going at the federal level, is we're trying to introduce legislation. We want to get some amendments into these massive spending bills that say, look, you simply cannot send federal tax dollars to a school, a post-secondary education institution, or a state that is allowing critical race theory to be taught in the classroom. So that's really what we're trying to get at, and put the speed stick down as much as we possibly can.
Do you think, Congressman, that Nancy Pelosi is going to allow a defunding of any kind of CRT and any of those big non-really infrastructure bills?
Well, no, she probably won't do that. If it was defund the police, she'd probably let that come in, but not a defund CRT. I mean, that's right. That's where we. So well, the other thing that we're trying to do is we're trying to get are outside in the conservative universe, trying to get outside, whether it's special interest law firms to bring litigation, or the conservative universe to expand the narrative base, because this is has become an 80-20 issue, Dana, and with that being the case, we need to press that advantage right now and carry it home if we can.
Yeah, I was just reading an interview that a mother had given, and this is, I believe it was in an Atlanta school district, a black mother who was very critical of a black principal who was actually imposing segregation policies in the classrooms and separating the white students and the black students. And I was reading this, and the mother had every right to be outraged about it. And that's, you make a very good point. I don't know in my political lifetime if I've ever seen people, on no matter where they're coming from, so united on this issue. Have you seen? I've never seen anything like this.
No, and for it to catch fire so quickly and spread across the country so quickly, it is a first for me as well. And that's what I'm saying. It is something that we need to carry forward, because I think there are people in Congress, quite frankly, who don't like the CRT and the negative connotation it's become. So if you've got that, then we can press that in Congress, and maybe Pelosi gives in a little bit. But I think you've got the 60 to 70 radicals that are going to stand up, and Pelosi's got to kowtow to them. So that's why we're not going to get it through probably. But we got to press our point.
Yeah, and I hope I have a quick question. I was talking to Stephen Moore just before you joined me, Congressman, talking to Congressman Andy Biggs, and we were both kind of weeping and gnashing of the teeth over these infrastructure, that budget and the infrastructure bills that are coming down from the Senate into the House. Do you think that these bills are going to find, I don't want to say favorability, that's not the way, are they going to get help from Republicans in the House the way that they kind of got in the Senate? What is your take on that?
Well, I'm embarrassed to say this, but yesterday some of my colleagues and I were taking over and under how many Republicans were going to support the infrastructure bill. And I think there's going to be Republicans that support it in a pretty large way. I mean, our leadership and we in the HFC, of course, are fighting this, and our leadership should be fighting this too. We should be doing whip counts on this, in my opinion. But I'm afraid that there's going to be some Republicans that join, just like you saw in the Senate, the infrastructure bill. The next question would be about the budget bill. I don't think that you're going to get any Republicans really to go along with the massive $3.5 trillion spending package.
I hope not, but the infrastructure, because it's, as we talk, because it's not really infrastructure, it's everything that they want to call infrastructure, which makes me worry about what happens when we do actually have to go out and repair a bunch of roads and bridges. We're going to have burned through all that taxpayer cash and goodwill. They can't very well go back hat in hand and ask for more money when they said that they were doing it on infrastructure in the first place. Last question on that issue, because I want to talk to you about the border and Mayorkas and all of that. But is there a reason why are Republicans, at least in the House, and I was talking about this with Stephen Moore as it relates to Republicans in the Senate. Why is there fear that they're going to lose the filibuster? Is there some kind of strategy that I am missing? Normally, I'm pretty good at kind of figuring out what the strategy is, but I can't here.
Me either. I mean, I've called some of my friends in the Senate to just say, what's the story here? And I would suggest that even my friends in the Senate don't really understand why these people flipped. In fact, I think Joe Manchin it was reported Joe Manchin said that the Republicans, when they came in on the infrastructure bill, they didn't even have a list of wants that they were going to negotiate from. So this is, for me, this is ultimately a rejection of Donald Trump still. Because you take a look at the people that initiated that first round of negotiations. These were people that really didn't like Donald Trump. I mean, Trump had $1 trillion infrastructure package he was trying to get through, and they stopped all of that. But now all of a sudden they go over and do a 1.2 trillion that has some weird things like the breathalyzer in your car and the new cars and all the just crazy things that are in there. So I can't explain it, Dana. Well, except for believe it or not, I do believe they'll be happy to go back hat in hand to ask taxpayers for more money. I really do.
Yeah, I know I should give them more credit on that. That's something that they definitely absolutely will do. All right, shifting attention to the border, you are going after DHS's Alejandro Mayorkas because, and actually you filed articles of impeachment against him over his mishandling, his criminal and reckless mishandling of the border. This stuns me because, here in Texas, we had our governor, Greg Abbott, who's trying to stop taxpayer-funded transportation of people who are coming across the border, many of them, according to the people themselves and the third-party agencies that have been doing some of the testing, not all, and according to Border Patrol and law enforcement, there are people who are testing positive, yet they're still getting on transportation provided by the taxpayer and being sent throughout the interior. That's a huge issue, particularly when you look at transmission rates, but also that's a national security issue. It's a pandemic issue. And yet you have Merrick Garland filing suit to keep it up after Greg Abbott tried to stop it. And Mayorkas, DHS, this is his job. What is he doing, Congressman?
Well, he's basically defunct in his job. He's basically told people keep coming. He hasn't told them to stop coming. He's basically said, we're going to transmit you throughout the country, wherever you want to go. If you want to go to Detroit or LA, Houston, which gets a lot of these folks when I've been down there, a lot of them say they're going to Houston. And they're not enforcing Title 42. So they Title 42 is for people who don't know, that gives the authority to the Border Patrol agents to prevent people from entering because of a health crisis. Well, what Mayorkas did is he changed some of the terms of Title 42 so that if you're under age 7, a kid, you're going to get in scot-free, whether you have COVID or anything else. We're not going to send you home. And if you're a family unit, most of those are going to come in as well. And that's why, because people respond to incentives, last month over 19,000 unaccompanied minors were apprehended at the border. So he is basically facilitating the logistics arm of the cartels and the coyotes. And he's basically, at the same time, he's telling the ICE, quit enforcing the law.
Yeah, which they should not have right to do. I feel like we're going to continue having conversations about this. We're out of time, unfortunately, right now. Congressman Andy Biggs, always good to see you, my friend. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Dana.
Of course, take care. Folks, we have a lot more on the way. Stick with us. Well, it seems everybody is coming out as something. It's all the rage nowadays. These days, there's more gender identities than flavors at Baskin-Robbins. So what's yours? Well, it turns out another Robin, the Robin from Batman and Robin, is coming out too as bi. Now, some of you that are more observant won't be surprised. I mean, after all, Robin could never hold a candle to that piece of hot, toxic masculinity called Batman. I mean, imagine always playing second fiddle to that crime-fighting, square-jawed stud. Batman has a utility belt that would make any crime fighter have a serious locker room envy, right? So what do you do when you're Robin and you're always playing backup to that big, toxic, masculine Batman? Well, one thing you could do is try to overcompensate by running around with hot babes like Robin often did in the past. Of course, those lady friends always seemed like just friends, really more so than anything else. Well, if the bright colors and girlfriends didn't get your attention, Robin must have thought, I'll come out as bisexual. Everyone's doing it after all. And that's what happened in the latest installment from DC Comics. Robin is apparently now into dudes. In the book, he agrees to go on a date with a dude named Bernard Dowd after having a light bulb moment as they fought villains together. Robin rescues Bernard, follows him by paying Bernard a visit at his apartment, and then Bernard says, Tim Drake, do you want to go on a date with me? And the episode ends with a cliffhanger as Drake responds, or he answers Bernard's request with, yeah, I think I want that. Fans of the comic welcome the revelation, saying that they totally suspected that Drake may be bisexual for years. So apparently fans are loving Robin's new sexual identity. Is he going to dress up as a rainbow suited unicorn next? Who knows? And no word from Batman on Robin's newfound sexual preferences. So what's next? Will the Batcave, will it have non-gendered bathrooms in the future? Maybe. Like Bernard Dowd, Robin's new beau could be gender fluid. Wouldn't want to offend him. It's all so confusing, and it's enough to make Batman want to spend more time with the Joker because he's starting to look a heck of a lot more sane these days. That does it for us tonight. Thanks for tuning in. Good night, and don't bend the knee.